Psychological safety, probably one of the most important constructs in organizations, definitely one of the more complex ones to understand, and for sure one of the hardest things to truly reinforce and bake into the culture of your teams, of your management, and of your entire company. Let's go over the concept of psychological safety, understand it a bit deeper, and have some actionable interventions that can help you improve it. So the research on psychological safety has been quite extensive and vast over the past decades, and the effects are manifold, quite complex, and regard a lot of variables. But what we see over and over again is that it truly engages stakeholders. It's a supercharger of stakeholder engagement. It creates safety and trust among stakeholders in management and employees. And it also really improves the decision-making process and often decision-making outcomes as well. It is one of the bedrocks of forming a culture that is centered not just at results, but really at continuous improvement, at agile learning, and probably most importantly, a misconception. Psychological safety is not really about being nice and having an environment in which everything is to be said yes to. What you often see is that organizations that have a high psychological safety profile are often high-performing teams as well, and often gets quite uncomfortable. There is a lot of constructive conflict and heated debates in which people really do feel quite uncomfortable from time to time, but not on a personal level, because they do know that they are in a safe environment in which they can voice their concerns and speak up. So remember that misconception when you hear it the next time. And let's dive into what psychological safety actually is. So it's quite hard to define, I understand it is. And it's also something that has been baked into many models and frameworks. Here on the right, we see Patrick Lencioni's framework about how trust is one of the bedrocks of all team functionality. So it comes before conflict, commitment, accountability, and results. And when you have an absence of trust, it becomes really hard to function. Now, I would argue that psychological safety and trust are inherently connected. Maybe psychological safety is even to be placed underneath in that hierarchy, because it's definitely one of the enablers for trust and vice versa. Here on the left, we see the definition of psychological safety by Amy Edmondson, the leading authority, the leading researcher on this topic right now. And she states that it's a shared belief that we have an organization where it's safe to voice our concerns, where we can speak up, where we can be ourselves, where we can experiment and fail without the fear of negative personal repercussions. And I would like to emphasize shared belief. So this is something that you cannot just preach. It has to be something that actually everyone feels and believes in your team or organization. Now, how to go about improving psychological safety? This is a very hard question, and it's even harder to come with very concrete takeaways. And what we see in Amy Edmondson's book, The Fearless Organization, is that there is quite a simple yet proven framework that Amy Edmondson proposes, which has 3 steps: set the stage, invite engagement, and respond productively. But I want to say before that this is not a framework for quick fixes. It might sound like an easy framework, but it's going to be tough to really bake it into your culture and continuously reinforce it. But this will help you set the stage to do that. Starting with the first step, setting the stage. What is incredibly important is that you have a culture where all stakeholders emphasize the complexity of change initiatives. So we are talking about change management a lot on this channel and managing organizational change. And one of the most important things is that there is a mutual understanding that, especially in this world where we have volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity through the roof, you can watch our video about VUCA where we go a little bit more into that. The first step of dealing with that is by acknowledging it, emphasizing that there is complexity, that there is uncertainty, and that is okay. And with that, it's important that you, not just as a manager or leader, but as a stakeholder in an organization, can reinforce the value of speaking up, of having diverse perspectives, of having dissent, of having the real dialogue that acknowledges complexity, but is also looking for solutions when it comes to managing change. Now, the second step is about inviting engagement. So when you have opened the doors, when you have set that bedrock of safety, it's quite important that you model the right behaviors if you expect others to do that as well. Now, in the context of change management, one of the most effective ways to do this is to model transparency, not just by saying that you are transparent and that you're communicating transparently, but also to, for example, admit your own errors, share your own learnings. And make it clear that you are not infallible as a stakeholder, as a change manager, but that you are also trying to cope with this vast complexity and that you're trying to help the stakeholders along and vice versa. So when you model behaviors, it's important that it's a behavior that is easy to execute for you and that is also easy to copy for others. So try to make these behaviors as small as possible and then build them up to more complex behaviors as you go along. Next to that, it's quite important that you foster openness. So, of course, you can say that you have an organization in which speaking up is definitely encouraged and that you seek diverse viewpoints, but sometimes you really have to look for it even deeper, almost mandate it. So ask questions around you. Make sure that you actively invite people per default to contribute to the change, to contribute to seeking out this problem and making sure that we come up with actionable solutions. So asking questions like, what risks do you see in our approach to change management? What risks do you see in the way that we're going to roll out this change to pretty much anyone that you can encounter? But also to make sure that you can highlight what's in it for them. So when you speak to a lot of stakeholders, don't just focus on the change and don't just focus on your strategy, but also focus on how this change and this initiative can support their goals and their responsibilities. So what's in it for them? When you can find that out, when you foster that openness and when you invite them to share that with you, you're going to have a lot more to work with when it comes down to changing into a safe, psychologically safe environment. And the last one, last but not least should be said, is to respond productively. So if you mess up this last step, then all good work was in vain, because in the way that the human brain operates, we are very sensitive to feedback. We're very sensitive to social responses around us, and that shapes our behavior. So we need an organization in which people respond productively when a mistake is made, for example, or when a controversial opinion is voiced. When you frame these uncertainties as opportunities, and you can do that as a manager, but you can also do that as a colleague, and if someone comes to you and admits a mistake, it's quite important that you can emphasize, hey, what have you learned from it? How can we put the challenge, this mistake, into an opportunity for problem solving? This relates to growth mindset very much, a topic that you might have heard about. We made a video about that as well that you can watch on this channel. And another tip here, quite an easy tactic, but also often overlooked: recognize excellence in action. Out of the research to trust and psychological safety, we see over and over again that when someone does something right, you really have to reinforce that behavior as soon as it happens, and ideally in public. If you see someone doing it right, praise their behavior, not them as a person. Make sure that you make clear what type of behavior you are reinforcing, and then you will see that it will become a lot easier for your team or your organization to repeat that behavior and make it into a habit. So it's not just one step or one switch that you can turn around to create a psychologically safe environment. It's really a journey. And these small steps and tactics, these small habits, these small role modeling exercises can really help you step by step bake it into your culture and create that safe environment where stakeholders dare to engage and where change becomes a lot more fruitful and sustainable. Well, I would say go ahead and try some of these tactics out. Make sure that you tailor them to your own context, and make sure that whatever you are doing in terms of stakeholder engagement, frame this pillar of psychological safety as a priority and as something that is actionable and as something that is a step-by-step process. And we will see you next time for another intervention.